Good morning, all of you. Welcome. It's 9 o'clock. That means that we finally can get started on this beautiful Tuesday morning where it's very hot in Vienna again. So this is a YPN, Young Professionals Network, side event that we organize during the SnT. And this time we would like to discuss the future of the CTBT verification system. Discuss opportunities for science and technology, because we are at the SnT meeting, see how we can channel these developments that are presented today and over the next few days in the future of the CTBT. So we would like to discuss the current state of the verification system. This will be done next by Ian Hoffman, who I'll introduce in a moment. He will discuss the development of the system and how it has been implemented over the past 26 years. It's now about 90% in place, so there are still a few stations and facilities to be built. But seen from a scientific and technological perspective, how do we envision the coming next decades? This is something that we would like to discuss today. To that, I have additional panelists to my left of me that I also will introduce in a few minutes. We'd like to keep the conversation interactive. There is possibilities to discuss topics together, but also not only with the panelists, but also with questions from the floor. So if there's an interesting topic that you hear about and you're triggered, feel free to use the microphone that is positioned in the middle of the hallway, and you can ask your question. Well, as I said, this panel of younger experts, they're all YPN members. I will also explain a little bit about the YPN in a little bit. They will discuss what their views are and the challenges by the system seen from their jobs. They are employed mostly by NDCs in the world, also national labs, and so they will give their views. So the YPN itself was introduced by Norway in 2018. It's perhaps also nice to introduce. It was the goal was really to bring technological experts together to ensure that there is a way forward for new generations of experts and leaders to take the work of the CTBTO forward in the future. It's of course the CTBTO has been in place for now quite a while, 26 years, as I mentioned. And it means that we also need to keep the momentum going with the new generation. So this is the reason why the YPN is on Earth. Since 2018, so this is about 5 years ago, the network has developed quite a bit. It has developed into a network of 88 scientists and technical professionals from 34 different countries. And the network keeps growing, as I've heard from YPN colleagues during this meeting, so that's all good news. And if you are not a member yet, and if you're interested to join, please let me or any of the other YPN members know. There's also a YPN booth at the top of the stairs if you enter the conference. So if you're interested, please go there. And there's a lot of different activities that are interesting to participate in. We have, for example, tech talks, but also these kinds of meeting side events that we organize. There are also social events, of course, to get to know each other a little bit better. There's also an exchange program that I would like to mention. So plenty of opportunities and reasons to become involved in the YPN. So with that, I would like to move on to the program and like to introduce Ian briefly. Ian is a nuclear engineer and a subject matter expert at the Radio Protection Bureau of Health Canada, and he has been a researcher and scientific policy advisor to the Canadian government on nuclear proliferation subjects, including the CTBT and nuclear emergency response. Dr. Hoffman is active in the operations of the Canadian National Data Centre, as well as in performing on various CTBT and health protection topics involving ionization radiation. Dr. Hoffman also has been the chair of the Joint Expert Group, also called the JAG, since 2013. The JAG is one of the meeting bodies that occurred during the Working Group B, so one of the meetings of the CTBT. And he has been involved with a number of CTBT activities since 2005, including the International Noble Gas Experiment, and many national data center workshops. Dr. Hoffman has served in the Canadian delegation to the CTBT Working Group B meeting for over 15 years, so he knows a lot about the CTBT and the verification system. So I'd like to give him the word to kind of give a background about the verification system, what it entails, and from there we'll take it on to the panel discussion to have a nice interactive discussion. So please give great applause to Ian and give him the floor.
All right. Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for the welcome, and it's a pleasure to be here in Vienna with all of you today. My talk is really just a brief kind of overview of CTBTO, mostly aimed at people who are new to this environment, maybe just getting involved for the first time or very early on in their careers, just to give a bit of an overview of where we are and what some of the options are to contribute to verification science. Most of the actual detailed stuff will come from the panel discussion later, because we have a great body of experts up here who have a lot of experience in CTBT in very diverse areas. So please take advantage of their expertise at the end of the panel, for the panel discussion. So brief outline of my talk. I'm going to just mention the treaty and where it came from. Thank you. Some of the elements of the CTBT, there are three major program areas that are based out here in Vienna. And then one of the more important areas for everyone in this room is opportunities at NDCs and where some of the future opportunities are with the treaty itself. So as everyone here probably knows, the treaty is a arms treaty that bans nuclear explosions in all environments. One of the things that's very important about this treaty is it does have a technological monitoring element. It is not just a diplomatic treaty. So it's supported by a operational system here in Vienna with a state-of-the-art analysis platform that they are creating and has been under development since 1996 almost. So nuclear weapons test monitoring has had a very long history, and some of you, including myself, it's sometimes hard to know where to start because I wasn't around, for example, at some of the start of this back in 1958. So there's been a lot of work in this area in the policy world. Most of it has been of a sort of bilateral nature, and it took a lot of cycles to get to where we are today with the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. But along the way, we've had developments that are important, such as these regional nuclear free zone treaties that many areas of the world have taken part in. We've got the NPT, which is always important, and CTBT does fit into that. And that's kind of where we are today. So here we are in beautiful Vienna, and this is normally where the meetings are held in this picture. This is the Vienna International Center, and there are three major groups that are involved here. We have the International Data Center, the International Monitoring System, and the on-site inspection. And these are the three major elements of the operational activities that are going on here. So one of the other interesting things about the treaty is that not everything that was envisioned in the treaty was really fully developed at its creation. There were some ideas that we could maybe do this, and this would help verify or provide some verification information for the treaty, but it wasn't fully developed or fully understood at the time. So for example, noble gas technology was not really available at the time. We thought we could do it, and we didn't fully understand all the sources in the world and how complex this would be. And today we are just coming to a better understanding of that. And this has had, implications on event screening and how we do that. And it has, implications on how we combine all these technologies into coming up with an overall event assessment. And the whole field of OSI, there was some ideas about how to do it, but because it needed to be created, there was a lot of discussions that are still ongoing about how to do OSI. So one of the interesting things about OSI is that it's kind of at the intersection of policy, diplomacy, and science. And it's kind of unique in that because there are lots of things that are involved in it. For example, if you are going to have an OSI, you need to select an area for the OSI. Sounds easy, but we're limited to 1,000 square kilometers, and how you come up with that area is important, and it needs to be supported by the IMS and the IDC as part of your selection process. And then you have things that are involved in the OSI that also get into very complex things like, are you going to do drilling? How do you go about making the case that drilling is necessary? And you have to go through, if the treaty was enforced, you'd have to go through the Executive Council as part of the drilling decision. And then technically on the radionuclide side, there is the NPT, so that it's very important to have some spectral blinding so that you are not revealing anything that is related to nuclear weapons development. And so there's a very complex task of how do you do verification while also keeping development information about nuclear weapons from the non-nuclear weapon states. So OSI is interesting. It's particularly diverse because it involves almost all the CTBT monitoring technologies, but it also has some others that are not normally talked about in the IMS or the IDC. Some of these examples are things like multispectral infrared imaging, you have visual inspection, you have things like overflights and things like that that are very different from the network. So there are significant challenges in this domain to kind of assimilate and integrate data from all these different sensor technologies and provide decision support when you're conducting an OSI. So a lot of work is ongoing right now in that domain as well. So in short, if you're looking to contribute to the OSI process, any development of technologies, processes, and methods that improve event characterization and how to actually do the OSI or how to conduct an OSI, these are important areas to develop. So if you can limit the geographical area that you want to consider for defining your OSI area, that's a very useful thing. If you can improve the speed of which you do your analyses on site during your OSI, whether it's in the collection side for samples, the measurement or the analysis, those are also very important to have an efficient OSI process. Any of these things are very interesting domains to work in. So turning to the IMS now, this is the map of the IMS, and you can see that it is a global network with stations everywhere around the planet. You can see that there are many different types of stations, and there are 337 facilities in total. So a lot of things are going on in this network. We're now at the point where we're around 90% complete with some few stations left that they are in particularly challenging areas such as the ones in Antarctica, which are hard to do, but it's mostly completed. So current sort of developments in the IMS, and this is by no means comprehensive. I just wanted to put in a couple ideas to maybe kickstart discussions. We have new noble gas detectors that are coming online, and you can see many of them outside there by the vendors that are being displayed right now. These might involve new new detector technologies such as silicon pin detectors. We're looking at improving the particulate collection system for the aerosol collectors, but using electrostatic precipitators. And we're trying to reduce the sampling time for better location of events, as well as improve the sensitivity and the specificity of what we're actually looking at when we do our event analysis. In the radionuclide and infrasound domain, we're looking at the array concept. This is having a bunch of sensors in close proximity to one another, and they give you different information like local versus distant sources. They can improve the signal to noise in infrasound. These are concepts that are being investigated right now to see if there is a means to improve how the IMS functions. We are looking at improvements in the laboratories, at the IMS laboratories. We're looking at coincidence detection techniques, background suppression, and list mode analysis. We've looked at other things that I think are important and could be considered as autoradiography to look at physical characterization of the samples and the material that's on it. This allows you to have an understanding of the physical processes that might have led to having your sample there. And then in some of the waveform side, we're looking at fiber optic technology and bringing that into the IMS. And we're also looking at infrasound noise modeling to optimize sensor placement. So these are some of the domains that are interesting, that are kind of currently happening in the IMS. And so, you know, if you want to contribute to the development of the IMS, anything that kind of improves the sustainment and the overall performance of the IMS is a valuable contribution to CTBT. So, you know, we want to look at station robustness. You know, right now, the weather and climate is changing. We have more extreme events. Anything that we can do to improve the robustness of the network is important. Anything that we can do to improve the repairability, such as having modular designs. This is particularly true for the hydroacoustic sensors, which are very complex and expensive to fix. Anything that we can do to improve the sensitivity of our systems. Anything we can do to do remote calibrations, that's ideal. And you can also contribute to the validation and acceptance testing process. And there was a meeting here about that last week. So the last sort of organization in Vienna is the International Data Center. This is the part that distributes both the raw data and the process data, or the products that are derived from the analysis of the raw data, the state signatories or parties. So improvement in the IDC analysis is important to improve the verification regime overall and enhance the confidence of the verification regime. And there are a number of different initiatives here that people can contribute to. This is things like looking at the NDC in a box and the various components that make up it. There is a NDC in a box for waveform technologies and for radionuclide. So looking at the software that's involved there. There is the WebGrape atmospheric transport modeling tool, RN toolkit, the data fusion tool. We can look at xenon studies and ratios because looking at the relative amounts of different xenon isotopes is helpful to characterize events as well. We can look at atmospheric transport modeling improvements for both infrasound and radionuclide technology. There is a expert technical analysis part of the treaty that is being developed right now. So these are kind of some of the techniques that you can request of the organization if you want to do something in great detail. And the techniques and the process about how you do that is under development currently. And there are workshops going on for that as well. And again, I did mention the validation and acceptance testing process. That also equally applies to the IDC. So again, overall for the IDC, development of procedures and methods to improve the analysis of IMS data and the overall performance of the IDC, they're all valuable contributions that young scientists can get involved in. We can look at improvements in any of the technologies. It's all under development right now with software re-engineering programs. Things like the net visa algorithm is interesting because it's involving an advanced association for events in the waveform side. Looking at improvements in screening, which is very important. How we do screening and look at events and focus on what we think might be potential events of concern is important. You can look at the network and how it's performing and how you might optimize it. That would be interesting domain of study as well. How to form radionuclide events. This is something that we are just starting to get a handle on right now with some ideas there. So there's a lot of ongoing work right now. And looking at like sensor fusion as a whole, whether it's fusing radionuclide observations together or fusing radionuclide and seismic together, which is the kind of logical next step. And then the other domain that's also interesting that's kind of under development is the models for migration of fission products from a nuclear explosion cavity out to the atmosphere. We know from previous events, for example, that it can take months sometimes for radionuclide signals to actually make it out of the cavity. And when that happens, it's good to have a model for it so that you can kind of understand what's going on. Now, turning to the NDC for a little bit, you know, national data centers are really crucial in the verification process. They are the means by which a violation of the treaty is determined. It is not the job of the organization in Vienna to do that. It is up to your national data center to do that. And so they're the ones that receive the data and the products of the IDC. They can perform their own independent analysis, or they can use the tools that have been developed here in Vienna, but they are the ones that have to provide the advice to national authorities on the nature of events. And so for NDCs, there are lots of opportunities to collaborate and work together. The YPN is an important one, as we're all here for it. But you can work on the NDC in a box, as I mentioned previously. It's a common tool set that people can use to look at how to process data. There is the NDCs for All, which was recently announced by the Executive Secretary. This is an initiative to make sure that all countries can participate in the verification process, and it's to assist them with acquiring the tools that they need to actually do verification. You can create or collaborate on CTBT-related products either bilaterally or multilaterally. There have been a few initiatives of that have been going on over the years. And lastly, there are the NDC workshops, which are valuable opportunities to learn and collaborate with others on the verification mission. So kind of in conclusion, I just wanted to say that technology is at the core and it's fundamental to CTBT verification. It's essential for confidence in the treaty. And although the initial selection of monitoring technologies was fixed, the treaty does have a mechanism for introducing new technology or modifying what is currently out there. So we can look at satellite monitoring, we could look at EMP monitoring, we can look at drones, and there are others that we can think about and maybe discuss today. But we should not necessarily be limited in our vision and our approach to what is just currently in the network right now, and think about the network of the future. So the world is changing. There are more frequent natural disasters happening now, and sustaining the IMS is essential for the CTBT over the coming years. So the treaty, which is quite nice, it's evergreen in terms of technology and methods. So there is this concept of having it develop over the years. And that's kind of the few words that I wanted to say about the background of the treaty a little bit. I'd now like to turn it over to Jelle for the panel discussion.
Okay, thank you, Ian, for providing this good overview and refreshing our minds a bit again about the verification system, and also giving a nice outlook for the future, where all the science and technology can lead us to. And also I would like to echo actually your last words, that indeed the treaty is evergreen in its methods. And that's very important to remember also in the discussion. So let's keep an open mind. Let's not keep us limited by what is currently in the treaty, but let's first start with the technology. I think that's an important part. With that, I'd like to introduce the panel to the left of me. Well, Ian, you already know, but next to Ian is Paula Garcia Peña, and she is from Chile, station manager of the Chilean Nuclear Energy Commission. And she works mostly in operations and OSI. Paula, would you like to say a few words about you and how the CTBTO, how you are involved with CTBTO?
Yeah. Thank you, Jill. I don't know if this is on. Can you hear me? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for everybody for coming today, and thank you for Young Professional Network too, for inviting me. Okay, as Jill said, I work as a station manager of the stations I have in Chile. We have 8 stations, but I'm in charge of 7 of them, and also the NDC. And I'm related to CTBTO in many ways. Working Group B as a COTAS leader, and also OSI as a surrogate inspector. And I have been working in the Chilean Nuclear Energy Commission, which is the institution where we manage the national authority that manages the NDC and also the stations. And for 10 years working there. And in Working Group B, I'm a COTAS leader in support of provisional operations. And I forgot everything what I was gonna say, but in general what I do is to be in charge of the stations and NDC, and worry about everything. That means that you need to take care about the contracts, the PCA contracts, logistic, maintenance of the stations, and the communication with the CTBTO, And also the NDC, because we have many different stations, we have all the technologies except for primary seismic. So it's difficult to deal with all of them in one NDC because we need a different types of experts to deal with them. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Paula. Next to Paula is Maria dos Jesus, I think if I pronounced it correctly, or if I'm incorrectly, let me know. Very nice name. And I met Maria actually at the Azores earlier this year, which was a beautiful visit. Thank you also, Nicolau, for organizing this wonderful conference, the Infrasound Technology Workshop. And Maria is a research collaborator at the University of the Azores and works on infrasound and volcanology. Maria, can you tell me a little bit more what you do?
Yeah, I've been working in the IVAR, is the station operator of the IS-42 infrasound station in Graciosa Island. I started work there while I was doing my dissertation with Nicolau on infrasound site surveys for volcano monitoring. I'm currently working there. Basically, I'm new at this. I deal with the bureaucratic part of the maintenance of the station, dealing with the budgets, PCA, also checking the monitors every day. And my background is in mining engineering, and recently I just graduated for the Master in Volcanology. And that's it.
Okay, thank you, Maria. Next to Maria is Maggie Wanyaga from Kenya. She is a project manager at Sandros Limited and works in applied geophysics and seismology. Maggie, can you tell me a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. So, can you hear me?
Is the mic on?
I don't know. Oh, yeah, it's not
Okay.
on. So, yes, as you heard, my background is in art science. So I'm both a geologist and a geophysicist. And I am a project manager in the private sector, but I'm also working part-time for the NDC in Kenya. So like in Kenya, we have two IMS stations, a seismic one and an infrasound one. Whatever I do there mainly is on data. I'm also a CYG member, so my relationship with CTBTO. So it's not just YPN, but I've been a member for the CTBTO youth group, where I've done quite a number of things, which such as speaking at high-level events, and I'm really excited to be part of this panel.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, next to Maggie is Brian Young with Sandia National Labs, working in the realm of geosciences. Brian, how do you work with the CTBTO and?
Hi. Okay, my microphone's working. So again, thank you for having me here. Yeah, my name is Brian Young. I work at Sandia National Laboratories in the United States. So I may be a little bit of the stranger here on the panel in that I do not work for an NDC. I'm primarily involved in research and development on various software projects or science that goes directly to improve IMS monitoring capability or their software capability. So I'm a subject matter expert on the geophysical monitoring system, which is currently being developed at Sandia National Laboratories to slowly replace the existing monitoring system software. And so I help software developers understand various seismological algorithms and validate that. I work on regional seismic travel time, which is a software that, as the name suggests, lets you compute seismic travel times from point A to point B at regional distances. So I primarily am working, I go to Working Group B to support or present at the Waveform Experts Group, or I'm also increasingly involved in on-site inspection types of work here. So.
Okay, thanks, Brian. And then finally, next to Brian is Aydin Mukambayev from Kazakhstan. He is a seismologist at the National Nuclear Center. Aydin, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. I'm working in Kazakhstan National Data Center. I'm as deputy. And my background is seismology. I work from my NDC since 2007, and I started young engineer, and now I'm working with 5 IMS facility, one of the infrasound station, and 3 of them is auxiliary, and 1 primary seismic station. And everyone, I think, know it's a primary seismic station. Makanchi is best station in the world. It's very detectable, high sensitivity station, and I have chance use data from this station. And main task of my work is seismological research. In Kazakhstan, we have a lot of seismic event nature. It's natural event, mining explosion, induced seismicity, rocket launch, and many. And we are doing this work 24 hours, 7 days per year. And also I'm doing discrimination between explosion and earthquakes. And it's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Aydin. Okay, and with that, we'll move on to the discussion part, the panel discussion. The idea is first to discuss some topics on on-site inspection. I actually saw a lot of folks enter the room. So for those who haven't heard it before, it is actually supposed to be an interactive discussion. So if you have a question or find some topic interesting to further ask about or share your opinion, it's also possible. It is possible, just raise your hand and we will consider your contribution. This also holds for the people online. It's possible to ask your question in the Q&A section of the CTBT app. So for that, I refer you to the app. Okay, with that, I'd like to start with a description a bit of the OSI process and the steps of an OSI. How is an OSI team supposed to operate? And perhaps Paula and Maria, you are the people mostly involved in OSI from this panel. Could you give me some idea? Paula, could you start on this?
Yes, thank you, Del. I don't know. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay, let's start from OSI. For those who don't know what it is the final component of the CTBT verification regime to look for further evidence, and a member state can request an inspection to gather this information. So there are inspectors that now are being prepared. And I guess it's like, if I'm say something wrong, please, Luis, tell me. It's like 400 inspectors now that are being prepared for OSI, more or less, approx. And so it's a big challenge to train all of them, to make us to follow all the procedures, and to go into all the steps and remember everything. That maybe Maria can, because she's starting just now, you have 1 week training?
Yeah, it was
Yes.
The best week of my life until now. Yeah, it's a lot of information we have to deal in 1 week. Basically, on the second day, Maggie can also say something about this. On the second day, basically, it's the first day we start the training. We just went through it to negotiations, tabletop exercise all day long. It was a nightmare in the beginning, but it gave us strength to continue and motivation to continue the rest of the week. And the week ended with a field exercise. So we had to assimilate all that information in a field exercise for the first time. Everyone was divided in teams. Each team has a team leader. We had like a tablet where we recorded all the information, the photos, the reports we are doing. We do the navigation also by the tablet and GPS. We conduct the missions, and we come back to the base of operations. We send everything to be then discussed in an after meeting. It was just our first training, but it was a lot of information. We get it like that in 1 week, but it was very exciting.
And Maggie, I understand you are also involved in the OSI process. Could you add to your sharing with your experiences? Do you see any challenge? What do you think is the biggest challenge in the OSI process in the training, for example?
So the challenge, I had not thought about that, but what I can say about the training really is how much information you're given in a very short period of time. It's challenging and not challenging at the same time, because these are processes that you have to keep in mind, that when you go out to the field, if you mess up one simple step, could mess up a very huge operation. So there's that responsibility. And for the training itself, again, it was also the best week of my life, and we're waiting for more. And in terms of what we got there, it's not just applicable just for OSI, it's something you carry with you home, it's something you carry on even in your own personal life. So I would encourage people to join if they can.
Voilà.
Yeah, I would like to add that there are different types of expertise there, because you can be even a medical doctor who can be in the field. I mean, in the tents. So many, because we could think that just the experts in certain fields could participate, but no. You can work in operations, for example, too, organizing, data flow, or you can be an engineer and work in any different topic, so you don't have to be a scientist just to participate. So, and there are a lot of challenges that we can still be improved in OSI. It's still in development. So there are things that you can implement. For example, I wrote something here: reduce the size of equipment, being more easily portable in the field. For example, those details are very important. When you are there working in the field and you are carrying big detectors, for example, that is something that we care about. Or in the aspects of, we can start using artificial intelligence. We can incorporate it, maybe in the search logic, could be any solution, or satellite imagery, okay? So there are many things that we can maybe incorporate into OSI from different perspectives. And also the trainings, we have e-learnings, director exercises that we are going to carry this year. Yes.
Maria, you're looking at me like you have
Yeah, I
something
want
to
to
add
like
to
say
this.
something. I know this is a technology workshop, but basically OSI is to conduct missions, and no matter how much advanced the technology is nowadays, if we don't have a proper training to conduct these missions, if we don't have a team working in the same logic, the OSI cannot function. All missions on OSI are based in a search logic cycle that is called ITF, Inspection Team Functionality, and every decision has to pass in this cycle before the mission is determined. So I would like to suggest, maybe, I don't know, I just started last month, but I would like to have more training on search logic, because this would be very important. I can give you an example on our last field exercise. Actually, me and Maggie were in the same team on the field, and it happened this very funny situation. We need to record it some aspects on the visual observation component. One of our missions was to go to this, what looks like, first, because we cannot say that is a mine, a quarry or a mine. We just are observing. We cannot interpret what we are seeing. We are just observing something that looks like a mine. So it looks like a place where the rejects of a mine are deposits. So we decided, okay, let's take a picture on this. We put someone with a ruler to make the scale and took the photo. Everyone in our team, it was logic that the picture should be taken in the center of the open pit. But one of the members decided, no, that's not make sense at all. Let's take the picture here. Like, for four of us was logic to take the picture in that place, but for other person was not logic at all. So it was like a 15 minutes discussion in the field. And remember, every missions, there's a member of the inspected state party with us. if we, in a real OSI, starts to argue between us, in a real OSI, this cannot happen at all. So this was just a very small, detailed example, but the team needs to be prepared to function in the same logic process. That's what I want to add.
So for OSI challenges, we cannot only speak about technological ones, but also in fact about the human factor.
Exactly.
But there's a lot of technology that comes with OSI. Ian has shown a whole list of technologies that are used. How can I envision this? Do people think beforehand what they'll probably need, or do they bring a whole array of equipment with them? How does this work? Anyone has an idea about this? Paula?
Yeah, you need to prepare the missions. I mean, before going to a mission, of course, you need to plan what are the samples you're going to take, prepare the backpack of the samples for certain specialists, radionuclide or VOV, etc. So it's like anything. If you are going camping, for example, you are going to take the backpack with the tools you need, of course. Yes.
Okay. So there's, for example, also techniques that not everybody is familiar with. I understood, for example, from Brian that he's now experimented with a technique called resonance seismometry. Could you tell me a little bit about it and why is it used?
So resonance seismometry is something that is written into the treaty itself, but it's not a field of seismology that's regularly practiced, and so there's a lot of questions on how to actually perform it. And so I know that there have been some groups that have been trying different techniques around Europe over things like tunnels to see if it works. And the idea is if you have a cavity underground, if you set off a nuclear bomb, you make a big cavity underground, and that cavity should have a resonance frequency. So it's resonating and potentially producing a kind of seismic signal. So it's one of the technologies that is expected to be used for on-site inspection. And so I was most recently in a meeting back in November for on-site inspection, updating the draft list of equipment that will go out to an inspected area for the inspectors to take out to an inspected area, and we tried to focus on looking at the technical requirements of that equipment as opposed to specifics of the equipment itself. So rather than say we need X, Y, or Z type of cables and 25 meters of cables, we just said sufficient connectors for using equipment that can monitor things at these specific frequencies. But since there's not really a yet well agreed upon method for resonance seismometry, that's still kind of a question on how to perform that particular type of inspection.
And does one need a special type of seismometer to perform resonance seismometry, or?
It's unclear, but we tend to think that it's likely to be, there's likely to be a lot of overlap with the active source seismology type of equipment. So things like geophones and that nature.
Yeah. Okay. And if you walk around here at the, at this SnT there, I see a lot of new devices being shown, demonstrated. Do you see some example techniques that you see in the future OSI exercise?
Well, so a big new geophone type of technology are called nodal systems. And so instead of having a line of geophones that you attach to a string and you have, meters and meters and meters, tens of meters of cables, and you have to hook it up to truck batteries or solar panel, these are just self-contained units. You just carry them in a backpack and stick them in the ground. And so they sync by clock and by GPS. They may work wirelessly. And so I can easily imagine a future where traditional geophones that you clamp to a line no longer exist because they're just so onerous to use compared to these nodal systems, which are now rapidly being developed in private industry. So that presents some challenges because that's a new type of technology and it uses wireless signals. So Some states parties might be concerned about the security because those signals they could be interfered with. There's also, of course, every country in the world has different wireless spectrums that are regulated differently, and so that could create challenges. But that's a new type of technology that I understand a lot of places are looking at, including at here at the CTBTO. So that's one type of new technology. Distributed acoustic sensing is still an unknown, so there's a lot of research and development going on with distributed acoustic sensing. And for people who aren't aware, instead of a traditional seismometer is basically a mass on a spring. So you have moving masses, and as the ground shakes, you have a moving mass through a coil of wire and induces a current, and you're detecting ground velocity, basically. But distributed acoustic sensing is a kind of laser interferometry. So you have a fiber optic cable, just like a telecommunication cable, and they can be engineered in different ways. But you shoot a laser down that telecommunication, or down that fiber optic cable, and there's natural imperfections in the fiber, just because no piece of glass is perfect, that are reflecting back some of that laser light. So you pulse a laser down, and then you wait, and you measure the reflections, and then you pulse another laser light down, and you wait, and you detect the reflections. And so you can turn a long strand of fiber optic cable, hundreds of meters or even kilometers long, into a continuous, almost continuous seismometer. And there's pros and cons to that, and it's still heavily in the R&D space for our particular area of work, explosion monitoring. But that has the potential of, being a different type of technology that could be used for a variety of seismic means. It could potentially be more robust than traditional seismometers because if you have a laser and a photodiode and a computer, all those could potentially have no moving parts. So that would have some benefits. It might be easier to deploy an extremely spatially dense array, which could have various uses for on-site inspection or even for monitoring stations. So those are some new technologies coming up.
Yeah, that is actually a nice segue into the international monitoring system, which is a next topic on our list that I'd like to discuss today. Indeed, these could potentially also be future components of an IMS. Would you also see that, or would really be a lot of R&D needed before that is something?
There's certainly, I'm aware of a lot of R&D right now in trying to figure out how distributed acoustic sensing in particular could be used for new, next generations of seismic monitoring systems in the IMS, but it's still heavily under research.
Okay. Perhaps also nice to consider the noble gas detectors. Ian, you already mentioned something like that in your presentation. Could you tell me a little bit more about it?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. We're currently at a phase right now where we're about to deploy new noble gas sensors. And these sensors are an improvement over the first generation of systems that are currently out in the field in the IMS. They will provide faster samples or more samples per day, which is very important for doing source localization. They also provide better specificity as to what you're actually measuring. Some of the metastable isotopes are hard to characterize, and they're correlated, so you have to kind of strip them out and fit them, and it gets very challenging. But with these new types of detectors that are going into these systems, it is possible to have sufficient resolution to separate them entirely and then actually be very certain about what it is you're measuring. And you will have, in addition to being more samples in a day, you will also have a more sensitive measurement platform. So we're able to now measure radio xenon signals at a much lower level than previously.
And these devices can be viewed if you walk outside and talk to the manufacturers. Yes, there's some cardboard cutouts I've seen out there of some of the systems that are about to be deployed soon. So this is a very, very exciting development in noble gas monitoring. Okay, and 2 years ago this wasn't here yet. I guess 2 years ago we were online.
Yeah, two years ago it was virtual.
Yeah.
4 years ago they had some of the initial prototypes shown here, actually at SnT, and they finished up all the development. They went through their testing and qualification phase. That's something that actually our country participated in, was the qualification phase. So they basically have achieved everything they need to be certified, which means they are able to be deployed in the IMS. So that process has just finally completed within the last year or two.
Yeah. And do you see additional developments? Pardon me. Yes, sir. Christoph, there is a microphone coming your way.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to jump in on this topic on the noble gas. So indeed, I think there have been quite a good development on this aspect to improve it. The reduction in collection time is one clear aspect, and the reduction in detection limits. But the other aspect is, I think, one of the challenges is that the network is quite sparse. And I don't know if that's something maybe for the future also that we could look at to try, with the limitations of the treaty, to try to improve this. So I don't know, Jan, if you have some thoughts on this.
I think that is a very important point. Part of my comment earlier in my talk was that the treaty, although it's sort of fixed at the initial conception, that doesn't necessarily need to be the final configuration of the monitoring network. And so studies that look at what type of monitoring network we actually need to have to do this are very important. And coming up with characterizations of that is very useful, just like along the lines of what you've suggested. So yeah, I would agree.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I'm Mr. Joel Obengo from Kenya. Now, Maria talked about the difference in opinion in the OSI exercise you had, the mock OSI. How did you overcome the difference in opinion? And did it come from another level, or you settled it amongst yourself? And I'm sorry I came late when the session was in progress. I'm not sure whether there is somebody here from OSI department from CTBTO. Okay, all right. I would have asked the second question if such a person would have been there. Thank you so much.
It's not like, okay, it happens like it was not a discussion. Things didn't escalate, but we have to understand the other and be polite and make him think, why do you think that is the best position for you to take the picture? Understand why for him it's logic, why for him it's true that the right thing to do to take the picture was that place. But when it comes to logic, or is true or false, there's not an opinion on this. So this needs to be training, the thinking process behind this, or is true or is false. There's no opinion on this. You don't take the picture over there just because you think it's more pretty, you know. It's logic to catch all the scenario, the picture be in the middle. It's intuitive, you know. It's not an opinion thing.
Okay, thanks. Just like to move back a little bit to the sensor technology. New developments. Perhaps Aiden, did you also see some new developments that you could see in the future IMS or even in OSI, in your opinion?
I know some company who produce some active part of seismic instrument. It's for oil or mining explosion and monitoring it or something. And they produce that kind of seismic station. It's including one component or three component station, including digitizer, GPS, and wireless system for transmitting data. And the main goal of on-site inspection is install seismic station quickly, because we have limited data. We must install seismic network, we must get some data, process this data, and also give some result. And for this reason, for example, this kind of part of seismic instruments is very easy to install. You don't need to install a seismometer, you don't need connection cable, put a power or solar panel or long cable, just put this in the sensor. I think it's a memory, I think. This station work in 40 or 50 days without any power, all included inside, and it's very easy to install to get data. And you can put many stations, get data from wireless, like Brian said, and it's very easy because just a few hours to installing, and you can get data, processing this data in real time. It's, in my opinion, it's a very good opportunity to quick deployment network, seismic net for SIs. And also, I think everybody know about Raspberry Shake. It's very small seismic sensor, high quality, low price. It's for all of us, its main question is how much is instrument, price of this instrument. And the Raspberry Shake also a very good opportunity for learning how we can process seismic data. I don't know about quality of data from Raspberry Shake, but we can use this all opportunity to on-site inspection for IMS, because it's IMS station, I don't know, it's very high price for the seismic network. And my opinion, it's a future for using low-cost seismic sensors for this kind of job.
So the trend towards nodal deployments that Brian also mentioned, you also see some merit in that, having those kinds of easily deployable sensors that have internal memory.
Yes.
Yeah. Exactly.
Everything is included in one small box, and
Yeah.
just put with some small house carrot.
Yeah.
Put
Exactly.
to source and getting that quickly, immediately getting that. It's very, very useful.
Yeah. All right, let's shift gears a little bit. As Ian mentioned, there's also something like climate change at hand in the world. It's getting a little bit warmer in Vienna as well. But it also has an effect on the IMS. How can we, and the question is, how can we ensure a sustainable IMS in a changing world? I was wondering if the panel has some opinions about that. Ian, perhaps you can start with that.
Yeah, sure, thank you. It is hard to say what the future weather will hold, but we're definitely seeing longer periods of extreme heat or extreme cold. One of the things that we need to make sure is that our infrastructure is able to handle these extended periods with extreme temperatures. So, for example, on our radionuclide monitoring technology, they often go out into the field and they're supposed to be cooled. And we might have had them in certain locations where you might have only 1 or 2 days of warm weather. Now you might have to be worried about the heat load over 2 weeks or longer. And having robust systems, for example, for that type of climate and those types of situations is very important. Similar issues are with the hydrophones as well, and the hydroacoustic network, where you may have more frequent storms. And particularly the T-phase ones, which have an onshore element, they are needing to be more robust than they would have been in the past.
And do you also see some potential issues with, for example, rainfall and abstract transport modeling? Does it make it more complicated to interpret the data?
Yeah, rainfall has always been a bit of a challenge with particulate data, but more frequent storms versus there is a need to be able to model rainfall and have it go into your modeling accurately, but that's not really different in this case.
Okay. Paula.
Yeah, I would like to add, I'm sorry, the question first?
Oh, sorry. Sir, yes. There will be a microphone coming your way.
Yeah.
I was just going to ask, with respect to like climate change and robustness of the network, is there any stations that we're currently predicted are, you know, at risk, and is there any mitigation circumstances happening at the moment?
That is a very good question. That was actually one of the questions that I'd like to ask. There are many stations in the Arctic and the Antarctic, as well as near coastlines. So yeah. Any of the panelists have an opinion about this?
Oh, yes, I have an opinion about this. I mean, it's, I think in all the stations, we need to identify first the hazards that we have also. I know the climate is changing, but we have to learn the past also. Because, for example, in my case, we have a hydroacoustic station with hydrophones. And in 2010, we had a big earthquake, because that is the problem of Chile, and a big tsunami. So the station was completely destroyed. And that was very expensive too. So in terms of money, I think it's very complicated too. And so we need, as Ian said, we need robust systems, sustainability. So we need to have a plan and probably to calculate how much that is going to cost, maybe, as a plan. And calculate if you have, for example, a tsunami every 20 years, I don't know, I'm just saying. But if we have that, maybe we should calculate the expenses we're going to have, and maybe to add the climate change also possibilities. Then we are going to have a kind of plan to face the climate change.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Maria, do you have any view on this?
In our example, in the Graciosa Island, IS-42 infrasound station, we have at least, in average, 4 big storms per year, which creates a lot of issues. The biggest one was only solved 2 months ago. Was a transformer pole that was burned with a thunderstorm 2 years ago and was only solved now. But more and more, these storms are passing right in the middle of the North Atlantic. No, it normally used to be down, but now it's passing on the islands more frequently. Yeah, as Paolo was saying, it would be interesting to each station evaluate the hazards for each one, and maybe with these budgets we can suggest like a climate change fund. It could be reliable if each station evaluates the hazards and may have per year, and we can propose something like that, I think.
There were 2 questions from the floor. I think it was the gentleman in the back first who had a question. Yes, sir.
Thank you. My name is Atalay Ayela from Ethiopia. I just have one general comment on OSI exercise. It crossed my mind for curiosity. Entry into force is still far away, and this field exercise, how realistic is it? Because it's mentioned there that the inspected state party member is always with one of the teams. So how dodgy and how friendly that chap will be? If it is a realistic world, it can be a different monster. So, I mean, it's really, when I think of it, how much are we realistic to it? I mean, when we drill this exercise, that's just a general comment. And the question is for Brian. On our STT training, is there any, maybe someone from PTS or we would like to get training on this regional travel time generation from some realistic looking events like volcanic eruptions or something? Because we have big problem of locating earthquakes in our region, especially when it comes to the crystal structure. Thank you.
I believe, Brian, would you like to answer this question? It was directed at you.
Yeah, sure. So the regional seismic travel time software is used for helping get earthquake locations. You create a a sort of event location hypothesis and then compute travel times everywhere and look at the error residuals between your observed travel times and your predicted travel times, and you move that around in a grid search sort of. That's one way to locate earthquakes. And there are, I don't want to say annual, but they're frequent, sometimes every year, regional seismic travel time training workshops take place around the world. There was a workshop in Oman the other year. It wasn't specifically regional seismic travel time, but that was a heavy part of that workshop. So they do travel around, and so I'm not sure where the next one will be because I don't organize those, but there are opportunities for training with that software.
Okay. Jan Magnus had a question. Please up front.
Thank you. So, Maggie and Maria, I understand that you have been training for being inspectors. So I just wanted to ask you about these bias that you encounter during the exercises. How do you manage it? And also, is there some sort of logic trying to elaborate missions, prioritize them? How do you manage to do that? Thank you.
Okay. So I'll first of all just answer the first question from the previous one.
Sure.
On how, so the mandate, so the treaty, in the text of the treaty, there is the mandate and the rights for both the inspected state party and also the inspection team. And how realistic are the field exercises that we do? They are actually really realistic. I think over the years from the trainings that have been done in the past, they've been able to bring them in such a way, the areas that we go are more or less areas that, actually, so for OSI, we actually do not make any assumptions. But when you look at it from the outside perspective, there are areas that you would expect if anything, if a nuclear explosion would have happened or a test. They are really, they represent that in a sense. And also the trainers are the ones who are the inspected state parties, so they play their part really well. Now, coming back to the question from Aline on how, I think it's more or less the process of planning how to go out to the field and to fulfill these missions. So the whole mission, so there is the OSI as a whole, and then there are different missions depending on the different things that you want to do. Is it visual observation? Is it environmental sampling? So all of these things, or the components, are decided through, there's a logic that is, so there's the search logic, and there's also meetings that are done to ensure that areas that needs to be prioritized are prioritized, or missions that need to be given. You know, you might go and assume, not assume, but see that maybe through visual observation that a place is interesting, and maybe and you come back to the base and you report this, and most probably through the process that is done in the evening and the morning before, you find that this area now will become a priority, which means that there's another mission that was most probably supposed to happen that will go at down level. So there is a lot of integration of all the information that you get, and the decisions are made in a very logical manner. Yeah. You want to?
Yeah, I can add about, you ask how do you manage with the bias expertise, like the situation, the example I made a few minutes ago was exactly like that. That's why the search logic training is very important for the inspectors, not use their expertise as a reason to conduct an operation. It never happened a real OSI, but there are several scenarios, and each one of them are completely different. So we don't know what will happen. We have to be prepared for all them. But even if we are prepared for all them, it can appear a real OSI, and we never got that scenario in the trainings. But with the the mindset prepared to deal within the team in the same base way to think is the first step for the things to be done properly. But I think inside the team, between the inspectors, we can manage that, but the challenge is to deal with the inspected state party. We don't know how the ISP will be. So we need trainings also in negotiations. We need to be polite, diplomatic. Of course, we cannot control how the other side will react, but we just have to behave ourselves and that's why we have the trainings to deal with these situations.
Thank you. Jo Magnus, please.
Thank you. Maybe more of a comment than a question, but I just wanted to build on some of the comments from Ian and Paola regarding the sustainability of the IMS. Of course, we all need the IMS to deliver data all the time of high quality. And as we see on the map being presented, the system is global. There's different challenges. We have the Arctic, we have the tropics, stations are everywhere. And there's also the aspect of legacy stations. Infrastructure has been established prior to the actual treaty being negotiated. So we have stations that are 40, 50, 60 years old even. So all these different aspects are going into the broader picture of sustainment. And I know there will be sessions later in this workshop on sustainment and also discussions in the working group B. So it's just this holistic view of sustainment that is really important to keep, and I think these challenges require a broad involvement of all the different geographical locations.
Thank you for your comments. I was also wondering, like, if there are so many stations situated in potentially hazardous areas or where they are susceptible to natural hazards, would it be an idea to consider relocation of some of these stations to areas where they're less susceptible to these hazards? Would anyone have an idea about this? Moving uphill. Ian? Or let's not start there.
That's a really good question. There is a process to be able to move stations around. Yes. It is challenging because it involves assessing the impact on the network as a whole and the sensitivity of the network. But you also have the challenge of actually understanding the climate and how it's changing, and having a means to assess that a particular location is more risky than another particular location. I'm not sure that is well developed yet, at least in terms of how we think about the IMS. So there's probably a lot of work that needs to be done in that domain too.
Yeah. And also I would like to ask the political component of changing any station. Yes, that's important in some cases too. Yes.
Okay. Well, let's change gears again and move to the processing of the data. So there's a lot of developments in machine learning and deep learning, data mining, and other analysis algorithms. How do you see these being at use at either NDCs or IDCs? Aiden, would you have an opinion about this?
Unfortunately, no, NDC didn't have any practice for how to develop this kind of processing data. Maybe Brian can say more about this.
A big component. So there's already been demonstrated in the academic community a pretty good capability to denoise seismic waveforms using machine learning. That will, I'm sure, be the same case for hydroacoustic waveforms and infrasonic waveforms as well. And so that can potentially improve your signal-to-noise ratio well beyond what traditional bandpass filtering might do. There's also a lot of work these days in the seismic literature on phase picking and event detection. So if you could lower the analyst's burden by having more phases automatically picked, especially if they are successfully creating events in the event catalog as opposed to being erroneous picks. That would reduce the analyst burden a lot, and so the network would be more capable of monitoring more and more events with an equal number of people without having to expand that infrastructure to deal with that, expand the human infrastructure even to deal with that, right? So these are definitely options. It may also help for on-site inspection. A large portion of your time doing as a seismic analyst doing an on-site inspection is going to be sitting down in front of a terminal and picking seismograms from aftershocks or other small, or if your inspection is in a seismically active area, picking seismic phases from earthquakes that are happening. And it's going to take a huge amount of time, and any amount of that could be offloaded to a machine learning algorithm. It does it for you. You create an event catalog that's much more rapid with much lower workload to actually do that. So those are opportunities for machine learning that I see right now.
And also in event screening, is there opportunities there, like automatic classification of events into explosions or earthquakes?
Definitely are. I feel like that's less of a mature technology, but it's being actively worked on in the literature quite a bit.
And do you also see these techniques being in use at the IDC already, or is this something that is only in the scientific community?
Well, certainly there was at the OSI workshop just back in November, there was a presentation on the success of deploying a bunch of, you could potentially deploy a bunch of temporary seismic instruments. So like, have this new nodal technology, deploy a bunch for an aftershock survey, maybe in the future have onboard processing for each of those nodes. So they're automatically picking phases by themselves, and you just throw it into some software at the end of the day, and you get an event catalog with 10,000 events, which otherwise would have taken, months of human analyst time to produce that sort of catalog, not to mention the actual deployment time for more difficult, traditional geophones with cables and batteries. So that I can imagine a lot of interest in on-site inspection for that sort of technology in the future.
Okay. And on the radionuclide side, Ian, what do you see? What developments?
It's a bit hard on the radionuclide side for some of these approaches because there isn't really a good training data set to apply for nuclear explosion monitoring. But I think there are potentially benefits maybe to be had by looking at doing improved calibrations of the data or the sensors, where you could use an AI or machine learning approach to provide a better calibration and actually have a higher quality information coming out of the IMS and into the IDC. So I think there are some potential areas of application there.
And in this sense of, for example, data fusion, that's also something that is kind of on your plate. Is that?
In data fusion, it's being looked at as well. There are a few groups that are using machine learning approaches and artificial intelligence as far as looking at the weather and how it's behaving and how to come up with better estimates of uncertainty. So it's an active area of research there as well. So I think there is some good application to data fusion as well.
Okay. If there are any questions from the floor, we'd be happy. There's a lot of time, so please, sir, in the back.
Yes, hi, my name is Tommy, and I was kind of interested in how flexible is the treaty in using the machine learning techniques, for example. Is there some kind of like bureaucratic concerns before trying to apply these methods, for example, in OSI?
Well, that's a good question. Ian, you may be the right person to ask this question too.
As far as the treaty is concerned, there isn't really any concern beyond the normal sort of process of bringing in new algorithms into the processing stream. So there is a process in the IDC stand up new algorithms and new approaches, and you can go through that process with a machine learning approach or an AI approach, and it would be equally valid. The biggest challenge with this stuff, though, is it has to be an improvement upon the existing system, and demonstrating that and going through the process can be quite involved.
Any other questions? Yes, madam.
Thank you. I'm curious about the machine learning part, because machine learning takes the data, like how far the data is way back to train the machine in order to be able to predict the location and the origin of the radionuclide source. How far way back?
Ian, would you like?
Thank you.
I've not looked at that technique in that type of application yet. I'm not quite sure that I have a good answer for you at this time. So it would be something worth studying, definitely, but I don't really have a good answer for you, unfortunately.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Josephat Muldo from Kenya. I like the way Pena, Maria, and Maggie have handled the OSI issues. And mine is more of a comment. I think in your training as negotiators, you will come across discussions on how to negotiate with people from different regions. I actually found that very interesting, because depending on the region where you are in, somebody nodding like this doesn't mean it's okay. It may be not okay. So you need to know the region where you are conducting your inspections and the character of the people in that region. Is it Africa? Is it North Americas? Is it UK? Is it Asia? And all those build towards your negotiation skills. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yes, the human factor is a big part of this. So let's move on to the last topic of this morning, the challenges from an NDC perspective. And I'd first like to give the floor to Aiden. Aiden, could you elaborate a little bit about how things work at your NDC, what challenges you see in working with CTBT data, perhaps, or tools? What are things that you still need or see potential opportunities for?
Thank you. It's collaboration between NDC. It's the main task of our joint work, because in the it's for example for our NDC, when our NDC is established, 1999, it's NORSAR. It's a Norwegian NDC help for our NDC. They provide some software for automatic processing array data, because the time it's seismic array, it's new for us. We just use 3-component seismic station, and it's NORSAR is very give help for us. And another example, for example, between NORSAR and our NDC, it's we established the International Training Center in base of Kazakhstan National Data Center. It's financial support from Minister for Regional Affairs in Norway. And we invite NDC staff from Central Asia region, from 5 Central Asian region. And the specialists from different countries come to our NDC, and they learn how to process digital seismic data. Because that time it's almost people working with analog data. They don't know standard of international standard, which how use that kind of data, and to process seismic bulletin in the international format. It's a very good example. And also, in framework of this project, we together with Kyrgyzstan NDC, we create a joint bulletin for our region. And you know, it's every network create own bulletin, but its quality is not enough. And when you locate in one region, when you create joint bulletin, is quality is more good. And after we use this data to creating regional velocity model and for creating RSTT. It's example, the challenge between NDC. And also all these results go to IDC or IEC because we provide our result to International Seismological Center, and we making discrimination event, and all of this result we send to IEC, and you can, for example, get IEC HB bulletin or GT events, and we can know it's exact true event, it's a natural event or mining explosion or industrial seismicity. It's always the result of collaboration between NDC and International Center, IDC or IEC.
Okay, thanks. So you see a lot of collaboration already happening in the CTBT realm, and that's helpful to you, the collaborations that you currently have?
Yes. Now we are thinking about it's creating training center and a regional training center. It's sometimes CTBTO announced training just for 10 or 15 people and from around the world, but it's not enough for our full globe. And for this region, if we create a regional training center, it's more comfortable for example, Central Asian region or Latin or Arabic or African, for example, and all this training in that regional language. And now is together with North Star colleague and our NDC, we making some promote of this kind of promotion to CTBTO to make this kind. Also thinking about better if we send our specialists to seismological data center, for example, IC, to learn how to process huge data. It's I must have a lot of data, and big data is now it's very big problem for any NDC, and IC have good experience for doing that kind of activity, and it's again our efforts to send our staff to IC or another for Sunday laboratory, not just in framework and CTBTO, but the goal is again it's house CTBTO, and we need to learn more. For example, I know Sunday laboratory it's have more experience, machine learning and RSTT modeling. It's how it's called. I call everyone to collaborate between us. It's when we're together, we are powerful. Anyway.
Okay, thank you. Maggie, how is that for you? There's a lot of collaboration between neighboring NDCs in near Kenya.
Yes and no. So, the collaboration aspect is something that is really important, and I think for the NDCs, particularly in our region in Africa, in East Africa, and the ones that are close to us, such as South Africa, Ivory Coast, and the rest, it could be something that will be really beneficial, not just in the aspect of the NDC as part of the CTBTO, but also in creating partnerships, like Aiden is saying. Beyond that will be, having research groups, for example, that tackle African issues. Like our area is really interesting. We are in an active rift zone, so you can imagine the kind of research or opportunities that come out of that. And what else can I touch in terms of collaboration? So I think in this aspect, it's also, since we have this platform, the CTBTO, it's up to the NDCs to take it upon themselves to create, it's them to take the initiative to create these partnerships. And that will be really beneficial. In terms, you asked about the challenges earlier. So some of the challenges, and I think we've talked about them in this panel quite a lot in the different aspects. So for example, equipment failure, like Maria talked about, it takes sometimes really longer, especially for developing and underdeveloped countries, because funding is quite an issue. And looking at it at the CTBTO perspective, there aren't any funds that are really coming in. Normally, for projects, there are funds that are set up. So if you're setting up a seismic station, say USGS or NOSA, there's always some funds that are put in place for equipment failure, for maintenance and all this, which the project caters for. But in this case, you find that that is quite a challenge. It's kind of like the mandate or a responsibility of the hosting country, but when you look at it, there are some challenges in that aspect, and you find that some stations are down for a very long time and data is not being transmitted, which should be transmitted to the CTBTO. And I think that creates a really, big problem. In the other cases on training, making the training accessible to everyone. So you can imagine what happens right now is that the experts are brought to Vienna or another place for the regional ones. And for that, it takes very few people to these training sessions. So if we can have trainings brought to, say, Africa or East Africa, for example, and we could have a way that we have more experts being trained, because the cost would be a little bit little. It's bringing the trainers to the trainees. Yeah, such kind of aspects. Also, for example, in Kenya, we have 2 stations, but our expertise is mainly on seismic. So the infrasound part is kind of like left a little bit on the side. So having trainings or bringing up experts in the areas that we lack, and also since it's one very big family where we have the different technologies, trying to see how, for example, my background is in seismics and geophysics. So more or less it's waveform data, which is more kind of similar to infrasound. It's also similar to hydroacoustics. So having these trainings accessible to experts of different, expertise. And then the other one that comes top to my mind is, so how can we, so I've talked about a few ways we can solve these problems. The other one is having, bringing in the new generation, the younger generation into this, and maybe having exchange programs that we have at the YPN, and that's also, right. Having them closer, like I'm talking about the trainings, bringing them closer to the experts and seeing how that can work.
Thanks. Okay, that's a very nice, thanks for this contribution. And indeed, there is an exchange program that is available to all YPN members, where you can visit an NDC and learn about new techniques. Currently, NORSAR, Geosphere, Austria, and KNMI in the Netherlands are involved, but it's of course open to other institutes as well. If you're interested, please have a talk with the people at the YPN booth upstairs. This is also the opportunity to mention that it's already 10:30. Time flies when you're having fun. And that means that we are at the end of this panel. So I would like to thank one more time our panelists today for their insights, and of course you, the public. Really.